The moment Matteo De Luca's eyes locked onto the faint purplish bruise on his assistant's neck, the atmosphere in the spacious corner office plummeted. His chest tightened, a slow, cold fury coiling inside him as he realized exactly what that mark was. A love bite, unmistakable and bold, marring the otherwise smooth skin just above her collarbone. It stood out to him like a beacon, sparking a tempest of emotion he struggled to contain. For a man like Matteo, control was second nature, but right now he felt it slipping. Elena Donovan had just stepped in with the morning reports, expecting the usual brisk professional exchange. Instead, she froze a few paces from his desk, heart thudding in her ears, as she noticed Matteo's dark gaze fixed intensely on her neck. He was normally inscrutable, a bastion of calm authority in a tailored charcoal suit. But at this moment, a storm brewed in his eyes. Storm cloud gray shot through with lightning. His jaw was clenched so tightly that a muscle feathered at the side. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low and lethal. "Whose mark is this?" Matteo bit out, each word measured and simmering with barely checked anger. Elena blinked, taken aback by the unexpected question. "Excuse me?" she stammered, instinctively raising a hand to her neck. In that split second, she felt the tender spot beneath her fingertips and her stomach dropped. She had completely forgotten about the hickey. A flush of heat climbed up her cheeks. "It's nothing," she managed to say quickly. Her mind raced as she tugged at her blouse collar, trying to hide the evidence of last night's lapse in judgment. Matteo slowly pushed back from his leather chair, the legs scraping against the polished marble floor. He came around the desk with a predatory grace that made Elena's pulse quicken further. He stopped just in front of her, towering a good foot above her 5'5" frame. Elena fought the urge to step back. Matteo had always commanded a room just by standing in it, but now his presence was overpowering, charged with something electric and dangerous. "Nothing?" he echoed, voice dropping even lower. The word was almost a growl. Before she could react, Matteo's fingers caught her chin, tilting her head gently but firmly to the side. His touch was paradoxically careful, almost tender, despite the tension radiating from him. Elena's breath snagged in her throat. He inspected the bruise as if it were a personal affront, the warmth of his hand on her skin sending an involuntary shiver through her. His thumb rested just below the mark, not quite touching it, but near enough that Elena felt heat pooling under her skin. "Who?" Matteo paused, and for a moment Elena thought she saw a flicker of something raw and unguarded behind his stormy eyes. "Who did this to you?" He enunciated each word softly, but she could hear the steel underneath. Elena's lips parted, but no sound came. Her heart hammered as conflicting emotions clashed inside her: embarrassment, confusion, and a spark of indignation. Matteo had never spoken to her like this before, so intimately, so possessively. In the 18 months she'd worked as his executive assistant, he had been the epitome of distant professionalism. Yes, there were moments she sensed an undercurrent of something more, like when his gaze would linger a second too long, or when his tone would soften imperceptibly, asking about her well-being after a late night at work. But he'd always kept a strict boundary. Now that boundary was in shambles at their feet. I don't see how that's work-related," Elena said, trying to inject some steadiness into her voice. She gently pulled back, out of his light hold, and took a half step away to reassert a modicum of personal space. Her skin tingled where his fingers had been. "It's my personal life, Mr. De Luca." She defaulted to formality, hoping to remind him and herself of the professional roles they were supposed to play. "I don't think it's appropriate." "Appropriate?" Matteo cut her off, a bitter edge to his tone. He let out a short, mirthless laugh, running a hand through his neatly groomed dark hair. "You show up to my office with a lover's mark on you, and you think it's not my concern?" His eyes flashed as he struggled to maintain an outward calm. On the surface, he still looked composed, Matteo always did. But Elena could sense the volcano beneath the facade, the jealousy and anger wrestling within him. She squared her shoulders, trying to hold her ground, even as her knees felt weak. "With all due respect, sir, my personal life is none of your business," she replied, each word careful but firm. Inside, she was reeling. She couldn't fathom why he was reacting like this. Surely he wasn't jealous? The notion was as enticing as it was unbelievable, threatening to send her heart into a dangerous flutter. But she couldn't allow herself to hope for something that seemed so impossible. "I complete all my tasks on time. I've never let my personal affairs interfere with my work." Her voice gained strength as she spoke, driven by a mix of embarrassment and frustration at his interrogation. "So I don't see why this is an issue." Matteo's eyes narrowed. Elena could practically feel the temperature drop further, the weight of his stare pressing on her. He stepped forward, eliminating the space she'd tried to create. Elena instinctively backed up until she felt the edge of his desk against her hip. Her breath caught as he loomed over her, one hand braced on the desk beside her, caging her in without even touching her. "It's an issue," he said quietly, dangerously, "because I don't like my people being marked without my knowledge." The possessive implication hung heavily in the air. Elena's eyes widened at his choice of words. "I'm not your property." She fired back before she could stop herself. It was bold, borderline insubordinate, and the flash of surprise on Matteo's face told her he'd never expected her to say it. But Elena was mortified and angry now. His closeness, his scent, an intoxicating mix of clean cologne and something undeniably him, was making it hard to think, but she forced herself to focus. "With all due respect, sir," she added, voice softer but no less firm. "My neck, my life outside these walls, none of that falls under your jurisdiction." Matteo's nostrils flared. For a moment, she thought she'd finally pushed him too far. He had a fearsome reputation. He hadn't gotten to be head of the De Luca family by being mild-mannered. She had seen flashes of his ruthlessness in meetings with disloyal associates or when barking orders at his security detail, but he'd never directed that edge at her. Until now. Yet even as his temper threatened to ignite, Elena caught that flicker again in his eyes. Worry. It was gone as soon as it appeared, masked by his frustration. But she was sure she hadn't imagined it. "Elena," he said, and the way her name rolled off his tongue, low and rough, sent a subtle thrill through her despite the tension. "You have no idea." He trailed off, jaw working as if he was grappling with whether to say more. Before either of them could speak again, a sharp rap at the door broke the moment. Both of them turned their heads toward the sound. Through the frosted glass, Elena could make out the silhouette of Dominic, Matteo's head of security. "Boss?" came Dominic's muffled voice from outside, polite but urgent. Matteo exhaled slowly, his eyes still locked on Elena's for a beat longer. In them, she saw frustration, concern, and something else she dared not name. He straightened, pulling back from where he had her subtly pinned. The sudden absence of his body heat made her realize just how close they had been standing. "We'll finish this later," he muttered, voice laced with promise. Or was it a threat? Elena couldn't tell. Then, raising his voice, he answered, "Enter." The door opened, and Dominic stepped in, a bulky man with a permanently serious expression. He took in the scene. Elena flushed and wide-eyed, Matteo tense, and if Dominic found it curious, he was smart enough to keep his thoughts to himself. "I apologize for the interruption," Dominic said, clearing his throat. "We have that call with the New York investors in 5 minutes, sir. The line is already set up." Matteo's jaw ticked, clearly displeased by the timing. He nodded curtly. "I'll be right there." Dominic gave a respectful nod and backed out quickly. The moment they were alone again, Matteo turned his focus back to Elena. Her heart gave a traitorous flip under the intensity of his stare. "This conversation isn't over," he stated, each word deliberate. Elena opened her mouth to respond, to apologize for speaking out of turn or to ask what exactly he meant, but no words came. She was too tangled up in her own racing emotions. Matteo closed his eyes for a moment, as if collecting himself. When he opened them, some semblance of his usual cool demeanor had fallen back into place, though his voice was still tight. "We'll talk later. Don't." He paused, hesitating as if restraining himself from giving an order he had no right to give. "Just stay here in the building until I'm finished with this call. Understood?" It wasn't exactly gentle, but there was a note of concern under the command that made Elena swallow hard. She nodded mutely. Satisfied for now, Matteo strode out, pulling the door shut behind him with more force than necessary. As soon as he was gone, Elena sagged against the desk, her hands trembling. She realized she'd been clutching the stack of reports to her chest the whole time like a shield. The papers were now a crumpled mess. Her mind was a whirlwind. She brought her fingers back to her neck, brushing over the hickey, the catalyst of this chaos. Heat flooded her face again as she recalled how it got there in the first place. Last night, what had started as an innocent attempt to have a normal evening had spiraled into something unexpected. After months of crushing on a man who kept her at arm's length, Elena had finally let her best friend talk her into a blind date. She needed a distraction, Sophia had insisted. A chance to remember that there was more to life than catering to the demands of an all-consuming job, and pining for a boss who was as untouchable as he was irresistible. Against her better judgment, Elena had agreed. The date, a lawyer named Mark whom Sophia knew from college, had been charming enough over dinner. Elena tried to engage, laughing at the right moments and sharing tidbits about herself. But her mind kept drifting, to the stern yet captivating man she saw nearly every day. She remembered how earlier that week Matteo had shed his suit jacket in the late hours as they worked on a contract, rolling up his sleeves and revealing forearms corded with muscle. She remembered the way his normally guarded face had softened, just a touch, when he'd thanked her for staying late. Shaking her head, she'd forced herself to focus on Mark's anecdotes. Still, a persistent thought had throbbed in the back of her mind. He's not Matteo. After dinner, Mark had walked her to her apartment door. He was handsome in a clean-cut way, with sandy hair and an easy smile. He'd made her feel comfortable, and Elena had been determined to prove to herself she could move on from her silly infatuation with her boss. So when Mark leaned in, she hadn't pulled away. His kiss was gentle at first, and Elena did her best to lose herself in it. Maybe if she closed her eyes, she could pretend she felt the same thrill she felt whenever Matteo's hand accidentally brushed hers reaching for a file. But she didn't. Still, she let Mark's lips travel to her neck, perhaps hoping that some spark might ignite if she gave it time. It was then he'd suckled lightly at her skin, drawing a gasp from her, half surprise, half discomfort. She hadn't expected him to be quite so forward. A moment later, Elena had gently pushed him back, mumbling something about an early morning. Mark had apologized instantly, looking a bit sheepish for getting carried away. He was respectful enough to take no for an answer, and had left with a warm, if slightly awkward goodnight. Elena had closed her door, leaning against it with a heavy sigh. The encounter left her feeling empty, a stark confirmation that her heart wasn't in it. The entire time, she'd been wishing it was someone else's arms around her, someone else's lips grazing her skin. It was foolish, she knew that. Matteo De Luca was dangerous, in more ways than one. Daydreaming about her criminal kingpin of a boss was the definition of a bad idea, and yet her heart refused to listen to reason. She had noticed the purpling mark on her neck while getting ready for bed. It made her wince, part guilt, part annoyance at herself for letting things go even that far with Mark when her feelings were so clearly elsewhere. She'd covered it with concealer this morning, or so she thought. Perhaps in her rush to not be late, she'd done a poor job of it. Clearly, Matteo had noticed. Elena closed her eyes, mortified. Of course he noticed. Matteo noticed everything. It was part of what made him so good at what he did, both in business and in his other dealings. but she never imagined that he would care about something like a simple hickey. The way he reacted, it was as if it mattered to him on a personal level. Just then, her phone buzzed on the desk where she'd set down the reports. Elena jumped, nerves still on edge. She glanced at the screen, a text from Sophia. Sophia. So? How was last night? Dietz Plaus. Did you like him? Going out again? Elena huffed a soft, humorless laugh. Trust Sophia's terrible timing. She had no idea the chaos her well-meaning setup had unleashed. Elena bit her lip, contemplating how to respond. She settled on honesty. Well, partial honesty. Her thumbs flew over the keyboard. Elena, dinner was fine. He's nice, but it made me realize I'm not really ready to date right now. Sophia, not ready or not interested because of a certain tall, dark, and dangerous someone? Elena's heart skipped at that. Sophia was one of the few who knew about her hopeless crush on Matteo. She had kept it secret from everyone else. God forbid it got around and somehow back to him. But she'd confessed it to Sophia in a moment of rare vulnerability months ago. Back then, she'd been almost delirious after Matteo had unexpectedly shown up at the hospital when Elena had a health scare with her grandmother. He'd appeared out of nowhere, making sure Elena was okay, and had offered one of his drivers to take her home. It was the kindest thing he'd ever done for her, and the incident left Elena both grateful and confused about what it meant. In her emotional state, she'd spilled everything to Sophia. How handsome he was, how safe she felt with him despite his frightening reputation, how her stomach fluttered whenever he was near. That was when Sophia had realized the depth of Elena's feelings, and the improbability of them ever being returned. Elena. It's not about him. Elena typed the lie reflexively. Admitting the truth, even to Sophia, felt too raw right now. Just don't think Mark is my type. I'm sorry, and please thank him for me. Sophia. You don't owe him an apology, E. It's okay if you didn't vibe. But babe, I just want you to be happy. You deserve to have someone. 3. Elena's throat tightened. Happy. She wasn't sure happiness was in the cards as long as she couldn't get Matteo out of her system. She started to type a response when a second text from Sophia arrived. Sophia, wait, you said, not ready to date right now. Did something happen? OMG, do I need to call? Elena sighed. Of course Sophia's sharp eye would catch that phrasing. She decided to step into the hallway to make a quick call before Matteo could return, and find her still dithering in his office. Clutching her phone, Elena left the reports on his desk. She could straighten them later, and slipped out. She took the back corridor towards the break room for some privacy. Her heels clicked on the polished floor, the sound echoing her still racing heartbeat. Once she was sure she was alone, she dialed Sophia. Her friend picked up on the second ring. Okay, spill, Sophia demanded even before hello. What happened? Elena sank into one of the empty chairs in the lounge area, her shoulders sagging. Matteo saw the hickey, she whispered, glancing around to ensure no one was within earshot. Even here, she was wary. Most employees of DeLuca International had no clue about Matteo's double identity as a Mafia boss, but they all feared and respected him as a CEO. Gossip traveled fast in the corporate grapevine, and Elena did not want to become the center of it. Sophia let out a low whistle. And he... Elena struggled to find the words. He lost it, Soph. Not like shouting or anything, but it was... intense. She braced her elbow on the table and pinched the bridge of her nose with her free hand as she recalled the charged moment. He demanded to know who gave it to me, like it was some kind of crime. Holy crap, Sophia breathed, half incredulous, half excited. He was jealous. It's not funny, Elena murmured, though her voice wavered. Funny wasn't the word. Terrifying, confusing, maybe even a little heart-stirring, but not funny. You should have seen him, Sophia. I thought he was going to explode. I've never seen him like that. I have to say, I'm not entirely surprised, Sophia said, a note of vindication in her voice. I've told you for months I suspected he has a thing for you. The way he looks at you whenever I've dropped by your office. Like you hung the moon and he can't touch it. Elena's cheeks warmed, and she shook her head even though Sophia couldn't see her. That's just your imagination. Mateo looks at everyone like he's calculating their next move. No. Sophia was firm. Trust me, babe. He has never looked at me or anyone else the way he looks at you. There's heat there, even if he tries to hide it. What happened today just proves it. I mean, come on. He basically pulled a possessive caveman routine, right? Elena bit her lip. A part of her was elated to hear someone else say what she hardly dared to hope. But another part was anxious, remembering Mateo's thunderous expression. It was more than caveman. Sophia, it was like, I don't know, like I'd crossed some forbidden line I didn't even know existed. He said my personal life is his business, or implied it at least. I've never seen him so angry. Her voice dropped. It was scary. And yet... She trailed off. And yet? Sophia prompted gently. Elena closed her eyes, the image of Mateo's face inches from hers flickering behind her eyelids. And yet I wasn't just scared, she confessed softly. My heart was racing, but not only because I was afraid. Part of me was... She struggled, the admission almost too much to speak. Part of me was excited, Soph. As if I'd wanted to know if he cared, and now I have this hint that maybe he does. And that is just so... complicated, Sophia offered. Yes, Elena whispered. Incredibly complicated. She didn't mention how her skin had tingled where he touched her, or how even now she could feel the ghost of his breath when he'd spoken so close to her ear. Those were secrets she could barely admit to herself. Listen, Sophia said after a pause, her tone turning serious. I know you've had feelings for him for a while, and maybe he's finally showing he has them for you too. But be careful, E. This guy. He's your boss, and from what you've told me, he's dangerous in other ways too. The Mafia stuff. Sophia lowered her voice even though she was safe on the other side of the call. I know, Elena said, voice tight. She was all too aware of who Mateo was, the legitimate business front and the whispered rumors of what lurked beneath it, an empire of crime, run with an iron fist. She had never seen that side of him directly, but she had seen enough hints. The guarded meetings behind closed doors, the way men far scarier than Dominic deferred to Mateo with fear in their eyes. I know what he is. I promise I'm being careful. It's just feelings, you know? It's not like I planned to... She was interrupted by the sudden ping of her phone, another incoming call. She pulled it away from her ear to glance at the screen. Her heart lurched. It's him, she told Sophia, seeing Mateo's name displayed. All right, deep breath, babe, Sophia said quickly. Call me later, and remember, you're not crazy. He totally sounded jealous. Just watch yourself, okay? I will, Elena assured, and hung up with Sophia. For a second she stared at Mateo's caller ID, nerves jangling. Then she tapped to answer. Sir? She greeted, cringing inwardly at how breathless she sounded. Where are you? Mateo's voice was crisp, back to its controlled, imperious timbre. In the break area, she replied, standing up automatically, as if he could see her slouching. I'm on my way back to my desk now. Good, he said shortly. Come to my office. We need to finish our discussion. Elena's pulse jumped. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face him again so soon, while her emotions still churned, but she also knew Mateo wasn't really asking. Yes, sir, she murmured. He hesitated, and for a moment all she heard was his steady breathing over the phone. Then, softer, he added, And Elena, you are not to leave the building, not until we talk. It sounded like an admonition, but underneath, she detected that hint of worry again. Before she could respond, the call ended. Elena lowered the phone, heart fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird. It seemed Matteo De Luca was not done with this confrontation by a long shot. Matteo paced like a caged panther in his office long after normal hours, the city skyline turning orange with late afternoon light beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Their earlier conversation had done nothing to soothe the turmoil inside him. If anything, the sight of Elena standing up to him, eyes flashing as she declared her independence, had only intensified his resolve. He needed to end this uncertainty, one way or another. But he also knew he owed her more than anger and half-formed ultimatums. He'd nearly let his jealousy drive him to do something truly foolish, like confess the depth of his possessiveness outright. That would only scare her away. He had to approach this carefully. After the investor call, Matteo had intended to call Elena back in and clarify his concerns in a calmer manner. He even concocted a plausible excuse, that as his assistant, her conduct reflected on him and the company, and she should be mindful of her appearance at work. It was a thin pretext. He himself realized how hollow it sounded, given he'd never policed her wardrobe or personal life before. He hated the idea of hiding behind professional excuses for something so starkly personal. But what else could he do? Admit that the mere thought of her in another man's arms was enough to drive him mad? Admit that in the quiet hours of the night, he fantasized about being the only man allowed to touch her, to see her smile, to mark her skin with signs of his affection. Matteo dragged a hand down his face. He had never felt this way about anyone, and it was as exhilarating as it was infuriating. To make matters worse, Elena had left the office before he could summon her again. When Dominic informed him that she had signed out a little early, complaining of a headache, Matteo saw red. A headache. He knew it was likely genuine. The day's events had clearly taken a toll on her. But a paranoid part of his mind whispered, what if it was a lie? What if she'd left to meet the man who gave her that damned mark? The notion was intolerable. Find out where Elena went, he'd ordered Dominic curtly, earning a concerned raise of the brow from his head of security. Matteo rarely pried into his employees' movements after hours, at least not his legitimate employees. But this was different. Dominic had hesitated. He was loyal and efficient, but Elena was well-liked by all. The men in Matteo's employ knew she was off-limits for their usual surveillances. However, Matteo's withering stare ended any argument before it could start. It didn't take long. By 7 p.m., Dominic had discreetly reported back that Elena was seen entering La Bella Luna, an upscale yet intimate Italian restaurant across town, accompanied by an unidentified man in a suit. Matteo didn't even remember grabbing his keys, only Dominic's hurried voice trailing after him. Do you want an escort, boss? No, Matteo barked, already striding to the elevator. Anger and something far more vulnerable twisted inside his chest. She had gone to meet him, so soon, and after everything that happened this morning. It felt like a betrayal, even though logically he knew Elena was free to do as she pleased. But logic had no place in the storm of jealousy consuming him. The drive to La Bella Luna was a blur of honking horns, and Matteo's grip white-knuckled on the steering wheel. By the time he stalked through the restaurant's entrance, he had regained just enough composure to don the veneer of civility. The maitre d', recognizing him instantly, everyone in the city of any importance knew the name De Luca, deferentially stepped aside. Matteo's sharp gaze scanned the dimly lit dining room, taking in clinking wine glasses, low chatter, and soft candlelight. It took mere seconds to spot her. Elena was seated near a window, back partially to him. Even if he hadn't seen her face, he'd know the elegant curve of her neck, now thankfully free of that offending mark under a touch of concealer and the sweep of her chestnut hair. She wore a deep green dress that hugged her figure tastefully, a choice that simultaneously awed and infuriated him. Did she dress up for that man? The man now sitting across from her. Matteo's eyes flitted to her companion. Mid-30s, brown hair, clean cut, wearing an expensive but off-the-rack navy blazer. The guy leaned forward on his elbows, smiling like he was having the time of his life. Matteo felt a muscle in his jaw tick dangerously. He realized his fists were clenched and forced himself to relax his fingers before he cracked his own knuckles. Dominic had done his job. This had to be the one. Mark, if Matteo recalled from the background check he'd quickly had done on Elena's date. Mark, who worked at a law firm downtown. Mark, who clearly didn't know that reaching across the table to brush a hand over Elena's was an offense that could get him killed. As Matteo closed the distance, weaving between tables with predatory focus, he could start to hear their conversation. Elena's voice drifted to him, polite, but lacking her usual vivacity. "That's really sweet of you to offer, Mark, but you don't have to." "I insist," the man interrupted with a charming smile. "I'd love to show you that new exhibit. How about this weekend?" He was leaning closer. Too close. Elena gave a strained smile in return, and Matteo could see the tension in her shoulders even from behind. She was trying to let him down easy, Matteo realized with a jolt. She wasn't here to encourage this man. She was here to end it. The relief that surged inside him was swift and dizzying, but it was soon replaced by renewed anger that Mark was even here at all, pushing her. Matteo moved before he had a chance to second-guess the wisdom of what he was about to do. He stepped up to their table, imposing and silent as a wraith. Elena sensed him first. Perhaps she caught his reflection in the window, or maybe she just felt his presence the way he often felt hers. She turned, and when her eyes met Matteo's, her fork slipped from her fingers, clattering onto her plate. "Matteo," she breathed, shock coloring her tone. Mark looked between Elena and the tall, dark-haired man now looming over their candlelit dinner. "Is everything okay?" he asked uncertainly, clearly picking up on the charged atmosphere. Matteo didn't answer the man. His eyes were on Elena, raking over her from head to toe as though assessing for himself that she was unharmed and, indeed, as beautiful as ever. The green dress, it brought out the hazel of her eyes, which were wide with alarm. In the soft light, she was breathtaking, and she was here on a date with someone else. A fresh wave of possessiveness crashed over him. "Elena," he said in a low voice, inclining his head in a facsimile of polite greeting. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Elena swallowed, clearly at a loss for words. Mark frowned and straightened up, trying to assert himself in the presence of this unexpected intruder. "I'm sorry, but we're in the middle of..." Matteo finally slid his gaze to the other man, and the temperature at the table seemed to plummet. "Mark, is it?" Matteo's voice was dangerously calm as he sized the man up. "I'm Elena's employer, Matteo De Luca." He extended a hand slowly, a gesture that on the surface seemed civilized. Mark blinked, clearly taken aback by the sudden introduction, but he accepted the handshake. The moment their palms touched, Matteo's grip turned vice-like. Not enough to break bones, just enough to make a point. Mark flinched, his polite smile wavering as Matteo's dark gaze bore into him. "Elena is invaluable to my organization," Matteo said, tone smooth but laced with an unmistakable threat. "Her time, especially on evenings like this, is often occupied with urgent business matters." He released Mark's hand, which the man retracted, discreetly shaking out the sting. "Oh," Mark said, attempting to maintain his composure. "She didn't mention that. We were just having dinner. Mr. De Luca, perhaps you can have dinner another time," Matteo interjected coolly. "But not tonight." He placed a heavy hand on Elena's shoulder. The gesture was possessive and final. Elena sucked in a breath and looked up at him with a mixture of disbelief and anger on her face. He could feel the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric of her dress, and the contact only fueled his determination. "I need to speak with my assistant. It's urgent." Elena snapped out of her astonishment, embarrassment flooding her features now. Mateo, please, she protested quietly. You can't just— I can, he said, voice gentle but firm. He bent down slightly, lowering his face closer to her level. From a distance, it might have looked like a lover's intimate whisper. In truth, it was anything but tender. Get your purse, Elena. We're leaving, now. The quiet authority in his tone, coupled with the simmering jealousy barely held in check, left no room for argument. Mark stood as Elena, cheeks burning, rose from her seat. Is this really necessary? Mark asked, frustration creeping into his polite facade. Elena, do you want to go? You don't have to. He clearly sensed something was off and was trying to be gallant, though he also looked distinctly wary of Mateo. Elena paused, torn. Mateo's hand slid from her shoulder down to the small of her back, in a gesture that could be seen as guiding or controlling. The heat of his palm sent a conflicted jolt through her. Mark, she began, finding it hard to form the right words. This was a disaster. I'm sorry. I have to go. She grabbed her purse with trembling fingers. Mark looked upset but concerned. Elena, is everything okay? Do you need help? He asked quietly, eyeing Mateo as if the thought of a boss dragging his employee out to talk was very wrong. Elena mustered a weak smile. I'll be fine, Mark. I'm sorry about this. Her eyes pleaded with him to understand, though even she didn't fully understand what was happening. It wasn't fair to involve Mark in her complicated mess with Mateo. Mark opened his mouth as if to argue, then apparently thought better of it. Perhaps it was the subtle shake of Elena's head, or the near-dangerous glint in Mateo's gaze as he hovered protectively at her side. All right, Mark conceded softly. If you're sure. Take care, Elena. There was genuine worry in his voice. Mateo wasted no more time. He gently but insistently guided Elena away from the table. Enjoy your evening. He threw over his shoulder to Mark, with a thin, polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elena, mortified, let Mateo steer her through the restaurant, aware of curious stares following them. To anyone else, it might have looked like a jealous lover whisking his girlfriend away from another man. In a sense, it was exactly that. Except he wasn't her lover. He was her boss. The cool night air hit her flushed face as they stepped onto the sidewalk outside. Dusk had settled, the streetlights flickering to life. Elena immediately rounded on Mateo, wrenching herself out of his hold. Are you out of your mind? She hissed, careful to keep her voice low even though anger pulsed through her. What did you think you were doing in there? You humiliated me. Mateo's face was implacable, but his eyes betrayed the whirlwind inside. I was doing what was necessary, he said, equally quiet, though his tone carried that familiar authority. Necessary? Elena echoed incredulously. In what universe was that necessary? She took a step back, needing space, needing to breathe. Her hands were shaking with adrenaline and indignation. That was my date, Mateo. My personal evening. You had no right to barge in and pull that caveman stunt. He advanced a step, closing the space she tried to put between them. On the bustling sidewalk, a few pedestrians cast glances at the striking couple in confrontation, but one hard look from Mateo and they hurried on. I had every right, he growled, keeping his voice low but intense. You are my employee. I won't have you consorting with anyone who could be a potential threat. Elena threw up her hands. A potential threat? Mark is a lawyer, not a gangster. You don't know who he really is, Mateo snapped, the words out before he could stop them. It was a weak defense and he knew it. When Elena gave him an incredulous look, he doubled down. I ran his background, Elena. Her jaw dropped. You what? She stared at him as if he had grown a second head. Please tell me you didn't. Mateo at least had the decency not to meet her eyes for a second. He adjusted his cuff, jaw tight. I needed to be sure you weren't getting involved with someone who might put you in danger, The excuse sounded flimsy even to him, but he latched onto the thread of legitimate concern underlying it. You have no idea how easily a woman in your position could be targeted. She shook her head, a disbelieving laugh escaping her lips. This is unbelievable. You know what puts me in more danger, Mr. DeLuca? Working for you. She kept her voice low, but the venom in it was unmistakable. Do you think I don't know the kinds of people you deal with? The risks I take just being your assistant? Her eyes glistened, not with tears of sadness, but with fury. I accepted those risks, because I needed this job and because I believed in you. I thought what we were doing on the business front was above board, and whatever else, I trusted you to keep your darkness away from me. But this, she gestured back at the restaurant, this is unacceptable. You think you can just decide who I see or don't see? That you can drag me out in the middle of a date like you own me? Each word struck him like a slap. Mateo struggled to respond, to find justification. All he had was the truth, brash and unfiltered. Yes, he bit out. I can and I will if it means keeping you safe. But even as he said it, Mateo realized safe wasn't the whole story. No, this was about more than safety. It was personal. The compulsion that drove him here wasn't just fear of an unknown variable. It was fear of losing her to someone else. The admission echoed in his mind, terrifying in its power. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine. Elena sucked in a breath, her face draining of color at his words. Yours? She echoed, the single syllable trembling with emotion, shock, anger, and something else. Mateo realized his slip too late, but the word hung there between them, impossible to take back. He squared his shoulders, pulse racing. If there was ever a moment to lay claim, it was now. Yes, mine, he repeated, quieter but no less intense. His eyes bored into hers, willing her to understand the depth behind that simple word. I have very few things in this world that I consider truly mine, Elena. My family, my business, my... He paused, voice dropping. My people, the ones I swear to protect. You are one of those people. You've become important to me. Elena's lips parted in disbelief. In the golden wash of the streetlight, Mateo could see her throat working, the rapid rise and fall of her chest. Important to you, she repeated softly. So important that you'd steamroll my life? Call me yours, as if that erases my own will? There was bitterness, yes, but he also heard the hurt beneath it. You don't get it, she continued, voice unsteady. You can't just claim me like some prize, Mateo. You never indicated... She broke off, biting her lip hard, as if forcing herself not to say more. But he needed to hear it. He stepped even closer, close enough that her scent, jasmine and a hint of wine from dinner, wrapped around him. Never indicated what? He pressed gently. Elena let out a shaky breath. Her eyes glimmered with unshed tears of frustration. That you cared, she finally whispered. Not until today. Not until you saw someone else show an interest. All this time you've been distant, professional. I thought... She hesitated, then pushed on. I thought I was nothing more than a cog in your machine. So I tried to move on. Her voice cracked slightly at the confession. The weight of her words and the vulnerability in her expression hit Mateo square in the chest. Is that why you went out with him? He asked. A new tenderness threaded through his tone. Because you thought you were nothing to me? Elena dashed a hand quickly at the corner of her eye. What else was I supposed to think? She replied, trying for a steadiness she clearly didn't feel. You barely talk to me unless it's about work. You vanish for days on business trips, and then come back as if nothing happened. You're polite? Formal? You keep me at arm's length. Each statement was true, and each was a spear of guilt. Matteo had done all those things deliberately, to keep the walls up, to keep her safe from his world, and safe from himself. He had convinced himself it was for the best. But seeing how it had driven her into another man's company made him despise his own restraint. "Elena," he said, and for a moment his voice faltered. He reached out, fingers gently brushing her forearm, as if seeking permission. She didn't pull away this time, only looked up at him with those wide, searching eyes. "I kept my distance because I thought it was the right thing to do. Because I shouldn't have you. My life is complicated, dangerous. I wanted to protect you from it, from me." Her eyes softened a fraction, wariness giving way to something like concern. "Matteo, you can't decide what's best for me without even asking me how I feel," she said quietly. "And you can't waltz in and decide who I spend time with just because you have some sudden change of heart. That isn't fair." Matteo inclined his head, absorbing her words. She was right. None of this was fair to her. He had acted selfishly, irrationally. But as he gazed at her now, in the glow of city lights, he couldn't bring himself to regret pulling her out of that restaurant. "Perhaps I don't know how to be fair when it comes to you," he admitted, his voice rough with honesty. "I have been a coward, hiding what I feel under the guise of professionalism. But when I saw that mark on you," his free hand curled into a fist at his side at the memory, "I realized I was done hiding." Elena's breath hitched, and she stared at him as if daring him to say what they both knew hung between them. Matteo gently slid his fingers down to intertwine with hers. He felt her tense, then yield, her hand soft in his larger grasp. "I care about you, Elena," he said, the simple words laden with all the emotions he'd held back for so long. "More than I should. More than is wise. But I do." The night seemed to hold its breath around them. Elena looked at their joined hands, then back up at Matteo. There was confusion in her eyes, but also undeniable yearning. "If you care about me, you have a hell of a way of showing it," she whispered. "I know," he murmured, stepping even closer until their bodies were nearly brushing. He lifted a hand as if to touch her cheek, but stopped, hovering, uncertain of his welcome. "I'm sorry, Elena. I handled this poorly. I was out of my mind with jealousy. Just the idea of you with him." He broke off, jaw clenching as he visibly fought for composure. "It made me insane." Her anger was ebbing now, replaced by the surging reality of what was finally being laid bare. "Matteo, this is so confusing," she said. "I don't know what you want from me. I'm your assistant. I can't be at your beck and call for work and have you have these feelings too. It's too much." His gaze searched hers. "I don't want a cog in a machine," he said softly. "I don't want just an assistant. I want you safe. I want you happy. I want you with me." The vulnerability in his own words left him almost dizzy. But they were true. Every one of them. Elena made a soft sound, half a gasp, half a laugh of disbelief. "You can't just say that after all this time, after what you did tonight." But her fingers tightened around his, betraying her words. Her eyes brimmed, not with sorrow, but with overwhelmed emotion. Matteo realized then that both of them were shaking slightly. The tension, the fear of what each might say next, had them taut as wires. With a decisive motion, he raised her captured hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. The kiss was gentle, reverent. Elena drew in a sharp breath. "I'm saying it now because I can't hold it back any longer," he murmured against her skin. "And I will spend however long it takes proving to you that I mean it, that you matter to me more than any business or vendetta or rule I thought I had to follow." A single tear escaped down Elena's cheek, glittering in the streetlight. Matteo caught it with his thumb, brushing it away. She closed her eyes at his touch, leaning her face into his palm ever so slightly. It felt natural, like sliding the last piece into a puzzle he hadn't fully realized he'd been assembling. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly, eyes still closed as if afraid to break the spell. Mateo's heart soared at the implication that there would be a "we" to consider. "We go home," he answered, voice gentle. "I'll take you home, or if you prefer—" He hesitated, then forged ahead. "I can take you to my place, so we can talk more. No obligations, Elena. Just talk and be in each other's company. I think we have both been lonely long enough." His lips quirked in a sad half-smile, acknowledging the truth neither of them had spoken out loud. Elena opened her eyes, and in them Mateo saw a soft light of trust beginning to glow. She nodded slowly. "Okay." One word, but it held a world of acceptance. He realized he had been holding his breath. Relief cascaded through him. Unable to resist, he leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead, a promise and an apology wrapped in one. She exhaled, leaning into him for a brief moment, her hands clutching his lapels as if to steady herself. "Let's go," she whispered. And together, they walked to Mateo's car, leaving the restaurant, the remains of a ruined date, and the ghosts of misunderstanding behind. They never made it back to Mateo's penthouse. As Mateo navigated his black sedan through the sparse late evening traffic, Elena sat quietly in the passenger seat, stealing glances at his profile illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard. Her mind whirled with everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. His outburst, the confession of feelings, walking out on her date, and now sitting beside him with a new, fragile understanding forming between them. She felt as though she were on the precipice of something wonderful and terrifying all at once. Mateo reached over briefly, his hand finding hers on her lap in a comforting squeeze. The gesture was so simple, yet from him it spoke volumes. Elena gave him a small, tentative smile. "I meant what I said, you know." Mateo spoke softly, eyes on the road but voice warm. "I will prove it to you." Elena's chest tightened with emotion. "I believe you," she replied, and realized she truly did, or at least desperately wanted to. For the first time, hope fluttered its wings in her heart that this impossible thing between them might actually work. They were about 3 blocks from Mateo's high-rise when the world erupted in chaos. A black SUV screeched out of a side alley, cutting in front of them. Mateo cursed under his breath and slammed the brakes, tires screeching against asphalt. Elena lurched forward, her seatbelt locking hard across her chest. Heart pounding, she barely had a second to process when another vehicle, a dark van, roared up behind them, effectively boxing them in. "Get down!" Mateo barked, instinct overriding everything else. He shoved at Elena's shoulder, pushing her low in her seat, just as the first pop of gunfire shattered the night. Glass spiderwebbed across the windshield. Elena muffled a scream, arms instinctively covering her head. "Mateo?" she cried out in panic. Mateo's face was grim, eyes blazing with lethal focus. "It's an ambush," he bit out, already reaching beneath his jacket. Elena's eyes widened as he produced a handgun. She had seen a weapon on him only once before, and he'd hoped she'd never see him use it. "Stay down, Elena, no matter what." His voice left no room for argument. The vehicles surrounding them disgorged men in dark clothes and masks. It was surreal. One moment a quiet city street, the next a battleground. One attacker advanced on Mateo's side, yanking the driver door open, weapon drawn. Mateo was faster. He shoved the door out with explosive force, catching the gunman off guard and knocking him back. A burst of Mateo's own gunfire followed. Controlled, precise. The man crumpled with a pained yell, clutching his leg. Another assailant smashed the passenger window with his rifle butt. Elena screamed as glass cascaded over her. Rough hands grabbed for her through the shattered window. She clawed and kicked, adrenaline lending her strength. "Mateo!" she screamed, panic making her voice raw. Mateo's head whipped around. He saw a masked man trying to haul Elena out through the half-shattered window. With a snarl, Matteo threw his car door fully open and stepped out into the line of fire, taking aim at the man holding Elena. He didn't hesitate. A single shot hit the thug's shoulder, sending him reeling back with a howl and releasing Elena. A sharp pain tore across Matteo's left arm as another gunshot rang out. He hissed, staggering a half step. One of the attackers had shot him. Warm blood began to soak his sleeve, but Matteo barely registered it through the haze of protectiveness and rage. Two more men rushed him from the front. Elena watched in horror as Matteo, injured, managed to fire again, striking one in the knee, but the second assailant tackled him hard. Matteo slammed back against the side of the car with a grunt, his gun skittering from his grasp across the pavement. "No!" Elena cried, fumbling at her seatbelt. She had to help him, do something. But before she could free herself, the rear door was yanked open. Strong hands seized her from behind. Elena thrashed, but another man reached in. Together they dragged her out bodily. She kicked and screamed, nails raking at the arm of one attacker, earning a curse. Matteo roared her name, a sound so feral it sent chills through her. In the chaos, she glimpsed him struggling against the man pinning him, wounded, but still fighting like a man possessed. Elena's captors pulled her toward the van. Her heels scraped the pavement as she fought with everything in her. But one delivered a harsh backhand across her cheek that stunned her into momentary silence. "Stop squirming, girl." A voice snarled in her ear, foul breath hot against her skin. Tears of pain sprang to her eyes at the sting on her face. Matteo finally threw off his assailant with a vicious elbow strike and a twist that sent the man sprawling. Ignoring his bleeding arm, he lunged after Elena, only to be met by a hail of bullets peppering the ground at his feet from the SUV. He dove behind the open door of his car for cover. In the split second before he had to duck, his gaze met Elena's. She saw raw terror in his eyes, terror for her, and it broke something inside her to see this fearless man so afraid. One of the kidnappers, a tall figure with a black ski mask, hauled the van's side door open. "We got what we came for, let's go!" he barked to the others. Elena realized with a lurch of dread that their goal had been her all along. "Matteo!" she screamed again, voice cracking. She didn't want to leave him, didn't want to be at their mercy. The man who'd struck her shoved her roughly into the van. She hit the floor, scrambling up only to be pinned down by another brute who tied her wrists with cruel zip ties. Before the door slammed shut, she caught one last glimpse of Matteo. He had left cover, despite the bullets, and was running toward them with unbridled desperation, arm outstretched as if he could possibly reach her in time. The van peeled out with a squeal of tires. The last thing Elena heard was Matteo shouting her name, a sound of pure anguish that echoed in her ears long after darkness enveloped the speeding vehicle. Matteo's world had narrowed to a single objective: get Elena back. He stood in the middle of the street, chest heaving, blood seeping from the bullet graze on his arm, and roared out a stream of Italian curses that bounced off the nearby buildings. For a second, just a second, he felt utterly hollow with fear. A fear he hadn't experienced since he was a child and saw his father gunned down. It threatened to paralyze him, but he wouldn't allow it. He forced himself into motion. Dominic's SUV screeched around the corner not a minute later, two of Matteo's other guards in tow, weapons drawn. They must have been racing to catch up once they realized Matteo had left alone and heard the shootout. The sight of their boss wounded and alone amid shattered glass and bullet-riddled cars made Dominic's eyes flare in alarm. "They took her," Matteo bit out before the question could even be asked. His voice was ice, but beneath it Dominic detected the tremor of barely leashed panic. "Elena's gone. They took her in a black van. They had another SUV, likely Vitelli's men." Matteo's mind was already calculating. The Vitelli crime family had been sniffing around Matteo's territory for months, unhappy with his refusal to join forces on a narcotics ring. He'd shut down one of their operations the week before, making it clear their product wouldn't move in his city. This had to be their retaliation. "Boss, you're hit." One of the other guards, Nico, stepped forward, reaching for Mateo's bleeding arm. Mateo shrugged him off impatiently. The pain burned, but it was inconsequential. "I'm fine," he snapped. "Did you see which way they went?" "Eastbound," Dominic reported, already gesturing to his men. One was on the phone calling ahead to others in the network. Roadblocks would quietly start assembling, bribed police contacts on alert for the vehicles. Mateo paced like a caged lion, every fiber of his being screaming to tear the city apart brick by brick until he found her. His phone rang, an unknown number. Mateo snatched it up, practically snarling into the receiver. "If you hurt her—" "Easy. DeLuca," drawled a voice on the other end. Mateo recognized it at once. Bruno Vitelli. "She's alive for now. A bit shaken, maybe a bruise or two, but that's on you for putting up a fight." Mateo's grip nearly crushed the phone. Dominic moved closer, close enough to catch the outline of the conversation. "If you touch her," Mateo growled, barely restraining himself. "You'll what?" Bruno sneered. "Call your dogs on me? You're not in a position to make threats, Mateo. You're going to listen. We have the girl and we're willing to trade. You, for her." Mateo's blood ran cold. They wanted him to walk into a trap. Of course they did. Elena was bait. He had suspected as much from the moment she was taken. He locked eyes with Dominic and gave a slight shake of his head to forestall any argument. "Where and when?" he asked, tone lethal. Bruno chuckled. "Midnight, at the old steel factory by the docks. You know the place. Come alone, DeLuca. If any of your men even sniff around, I'll send the girl back to you in pieces. Are we clear?" Mateo's teeth gnashed. "Crystal!" His voice could have cut glass. But before he could add another promise of what he'd do to Vitelli if Elena was harmed, the line cut off. Nico swore under his breath, having heard enough to grasp the situation. Dominic's jaw set in grim determination. "Boss, you can't seriously consider going alone." "Of course I'm going," Mateo interrupted harshly. There was no scenario where he wouldn't. Alone, as he demanded, but not without a plan. He turned to Dominic. "Get everyone mobilized, quietly. Surround the area at a distance. I don't care what it takes or how many men. We're getting her out. But Bruno must believe I came by myself." Dominic nodded, though worry etched deep lines on his face. "Understood. But at least let someone tend that wound." "Later," Mateo snapped. The throbbing in his arm was nothing compared to the anguish clawing at his chest at the thought of what Elena might be enduring. "I'm not wasting a second. Midnight is in less than an hour." His mind raced. They'd timed this meticulously. They knew he'd barely have time to rally, that he might rush in desperate. Well, they were right about the desperation, but Mateo would not be reckless with Elena's life on the line. "Dominic, bring an armored car, and a sniper team on standby. Nico, get me another gun." He rolled his injured shoulder, testing mobility. It hurt like hell, but he could manage. "I'm going in heavy but concealed. They'll search me, but I'll have surprises. The moment you have a shot or a distraction, you take it. Understand?" Dominic clapped a hand to Mateo's uninjured shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. "We'll get her back, Mateo." It was one of the rare times he'd used his boss's first name, a sign of the personal stakes for everyone. Elena was beloved by the crew. She was always kind, always respectful. The thought of her harmed had even hardened enforcers on edge. Mateo nodded, swallowing against the tightness in his throat. "We have to." There was no other outcome he would accept. As his men scattered to their tasks, Mateo allowed himself one heartbeat of vulnerability. He closed his eyes, drawing in a shaky breath. "Hold on, Elena," he whispered to the night. "I'm coming for you." Elena's head throbbed and her wrists burned from the tight plastic bindings as two of Vitelli's thugs dragged her into a cavernous, dimly lit warehouse. The stench of rust and seaweed filled her nose. Somewhere in the rafters, pigeons cooed, fluttering at the sudden commotion of their entrance. The men shoved her into a metal chair, securing her with rough hands. Her ankles were similarly bound to the chair legs. She fought down a wave of terror as she took in her surroundings, the old steel factory by the docks, judging by the decrepit machinery looming in the shadows, and the distant horns of ships echoing outside. She knew this area, a no-man's land where legality had long been forgotten. Bruno Vitelli stepped out of the gloom, flanked by 2 more armed men. Elena recognized him from photos in Matteo's dossiers. He was barrel-chested with graying hair and a cruel hook of a nose that had been broken more than once. He approached with a predatory grin. "So you're the little secretary who's got Matteo's attention," he sneered. "Have to say I expected more." His gaze swept over her disdainfully, lingering at the bruise on her cheek left by one of his goons. Elena refused to shrink under his scrutiny. Though her heart was hammering, she kept her chin lifted. "Let me go," she said, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. "This is between you and Mr. DeLuca, isn't it? There's no need to involve me." Bruno chuckled, the sound echoing in the emptiness. "Oh, but you are involved, girl. When powerful men have disputes, it's always the innocents who become collateral damage." He spread his hands in a mock regretful gesture. "Matteo made a mistake when he messed with my business. He thought he could say no to me without consequences. Tonight, you're going to prove him wrong." Elena's insides churned. "You're doing this to get to him," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Bruno leaned in, bracing his hands on the arms of her chair. She could smell cigar smoke on his clothes and recoiled as far back as the chair would allow. "Matteo took something of mine. I take something of his," Bruno hissed, his eyes alight with malice. "Simple, eh? I wonder how much you mean to him. Enough to trade his own life for yours? We'll soon find out." Elena felt a cold dread at his words. Trade his life. They wanted to kill Matteo. "Don't hurt him," she blurted before she could think better. "Please, this is all my fault." She stopped herself, but Bruno's brows rose in interest. "Your fault? How admirably you take the blame, dear." Bruno smirked. "But let's be clear. This is Matteo's fault for being a stubborn, self-righteous punk. Though I admit, using you was a stroke of genius. He showed his hand, rushing in to save you at the restaurant like a valiant knight." Bruno's face twisted. "Makes me sick, these love-struck antics. In our world, attachments are weaknesses. He's been hiding you like a secret, but not well enough." He lifted a hand, and for one terrifying moment, Elena thought he might strike her or worse. She flinched, earning a mocking laugh from Bruno. Instead, he simply grasped a lock of her hair, twirling it with a disgusting familiarity. "Maybe I'll send him a piece of you if he keeps me waiting," he mused, enjoying the fear that flashed in her eyes. A finger, a pretty little ear. Men like him need to learn. Elena jerked her head away, nausea rising. "You're a monster," she spat, her voice betraying the tremor of fear she couldn't quite suppress. Bruno's expression darkened. "I've been called worse." He straightened as one of his men jogged in from a side entrance, murmuring something. "Ah, it seems our guest of honor is early," Bruno announced, glancing at his watch. Elena's heart leapt and stuttered in equal measure. Matteo was here. Thank God he was alive, and he'd come. But terror gnawed at her. What if this was a trap he couldn't escape? What if she traded one nightmare for another, watching Matteo get hurt or killed because of her? Bruno barked some orders. 2 of his men took up positions behind Elena, guns aimed forward. 2 others moved to cover the perimeter. Bruno himself stood a few paces to Elena's right, casually resting a pistol on his shoulder. "Now we see how much the great Matteo DeLuca values his lovely assistant," Bruno muttered. Elena strained against the zip ties uselessly. Her wrists were slick with sweat, and possibly a bit of blood. "Matteo shouldn't have to do this," she said, voice tight. "He should have stayed away." She wasn't sure if she meant it, or if she was simply praying that Matteo had some trick up his sleeve to get out of this alive. Bruno snorted. Oh, he'll come. Men like him always believe they can win. That pride is usually their downfall. He leaned toward Elena, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. When he's dead, maybe I'll keep you as a memento. He dragged the back of his knuckles down Elena's cheek. She recoiled in revulsion, a tear of fury and fear escaping despite her effort to hold it together. Bruno tutted. Don't worry, I'll be gentler than he was with my brother. Matteo practically carved him up. Did you know that? No, of course you didn't. He keeps that suave veneer for you, I'm sure. But we all have our demons, sweetheart. Your boss is no saint. I know exactly who he is, Elena shot back, mustering courage. She refused to let this man poison her mind. And he's twice the man you are. He'll come, and you should be the one worried, not him. Her voice echoed in the vast space. Bruno's eyes flashed with anger at her defiance. He opened his mouth to retort. But a new sound cut through the air, the heavy clank of the warehouse's main door sliding open. In strode Matteo. Elena's breath hitched. He walked into the faint overhead light with a steady, unhurried pace, shoulders squared, coat buttoned to hide any sign of his injury. His face was a mask of controlled fury, all hard lines and deadly focus. Yet his eyes sought Elena immediately, softening for the barest instant as they swept over her, as if assuring himself she was alive. Elena had never been so relieved to see anyone in her life, and so frightened. He was one man against at least half a dozen, walking straight into whatever trap they'd set. Bruno's triumphant sneer faltered as Matteo came closer. That's far enough, he barked. He stepped nearer to Elena, pressing the muzzle of his pistol to her temple. Elena gasped, going very still. Matteo stopped instantly, hands slightly raised to show he held no weapon, at least none visible. His eyes flickered to Elena, then back to Bruno. I'm here, Bruno, Matteo said, deathly calm. Let her go. This is between you and me. You want revenge? You have me. There's no need to harm her. His voice was steady, but Elena could hear the strain beneath it. His left arm was stained dark where blood seeped through his coat, but he stood tall as if pain meant nothing. Throw your gun over, nice and slow, Bruno ordered. One of the thugs moved to frisk Matteo. Matteo carefully reached into his coat with 2 fingers and produced a handgun, tossing it aside. It skittered across the concrete. That's right, Bruno taunted. The thug roughly patted Matteo down, removing a second knife from his belt and tossing it aside as well. Bruno's men encircled Matteo at a distance, guns trained. Elena's heart thundered. There were still too many of Bruno's people standing. Where were Matteo's men? Did he truly come alone? The thought made her want to scream at him for being so foolish, even as her soul ached with gratitude that he would. Now, kick it away and step forward, Bruno commanded. Matteo obeyed, nudging the tossed gun further away with his foot. He took 2 slow steps closer. That's close enough, Bruno growled as Matteo neared a spot about 6 feet from Elena's chair. So, here we are, the great Don De Luca, trading himself for a girl. How noble. Bruno spat the last word like an insult. On your knees. Matteo's gaze flicked to Elena. She subtly shook her head, eyes pleading. She didn't want him to submit to this horror. But Matteo gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, an unspoken trust. Then he slowly lowered to one knee on the grimy floor, never taking his eyes off Bruno. Bruno barked a laugh. I'll admit, I didn't think you'd actually do it. Maybe I misjudged you. Or maybe you're just as soft as your old man was at the end. Matteo's face remained impassive, but Elena saw something flare in his eyes at the mention of his father. You think this changes anything, Vitelli? Matteo said quietly. If you kill me, my men will not rest until every last one of you is in an unmarked grave. There's no version of this where you walk away clean. Let her go now, and I might spare your miserable life. Bruno's face contorted with rage. He pressed the gun harder against Elena's temple, making her wince. "You're hardly in a position to threaten, boy. You'll die knowing I'll take my time with your pretty little pet here after you're gone." Mateo's composure fractured at the edges, his fists clenched on his knees. For a heartbeat, Elena feared he'd lunge and get himself killed. But then a faint sound echoed through the factory, a metallic clink, high above. Bruno and his men were too engrossed to notice, but Elena's eyes darted upward. On the catwalk shadows, movement flickered. Hope ignited in her chest. Mateo hadn't come unprepared after all. In a blur, two things happened at once. A single gunshot cracked from somewhere up high, and one of the thugs standing behind Bruno cried out, his weapon flying from his grasp as he crumpled. At that exact moment, Mateo surged up from his knees with explosive speed. His right hand whipped out from inside his coat where the search had missed a slender blade strapped under his sleeve. Mateo launched the knife with deadly precision. It embedded itself in Bruno's forearm, the one holding the gun to Elena. Bruno howled, reflexively jerking away and dropping the pistol. Elena seized the moment and threw herself to the side, chair and all, crashing hard onto the ground. The sudden movement freed her from being a human shield. All hell broke loose. A second silence shot from Mateo's hidden sniper took down another of Bruno's men who had been momentarily distracted. Dominic's team, having crept into position, opened fire on the remaining thugs from the shadows. The warehouse echoed with a cacophony of gunfire and shouting. Mateo ignored everything except the man in front of him. With a furious growl, he closed the distance to Bruno. Bruno, cursing in pain, yanked the knife from his arm, blood dripping to the concrete. He swung it wildly at Mateo as he advanced. Mateo sidestepped and caught Bruno's wrist in an iron grip, slamming it against the back of Elena's chair, which was lying on its side. The knife clattered from Bruno's fingers. Freed from the threat, Mateo unleashed his rage. He drove a fist into Bruno's gut, then another across his jaw. Bruno staggered, trying to regain footing, but Mateo was relentless. In the background, the last of Bruno's crew were either surrendering or down, subdued by Mateo's men who flooded in. But Elena's wide eyes were only on the two men brawling inches from her. Bruno, desperation flaring, lunged for a dropped pistol on the floor. He managed to snatch it up and with a snarl, aimed at the only target he could, Elena, still bound in the fallen chair. Elena's blood turned to ice. Bruno's finger tightened on the trigger. But Mateo was faster. A single shot rang out. Mateo had retrieved Bruno's fallen gun from where Elena had knocked it. The bullet struck Bruno in the chest. He looked down in disbelief, the gun slipping from his grasp as scarlet blossomed on his shirt. Bruno crumpled to his knees, eyes bulging. Mateo stepped forward and kicked the weapon far away. For a moment, Bruno knelt between them, swaying. His mouth moved, perhaps trying to curse Mateo one final time, but only a wet cough came out. Then he collapsed face first with a thud and moved no more. Silence fell, broken only by Elena's ragged breathing and the distant slamming of a door as the last surviving henchman was dragged out by Dominic's team. Mateo rushed to Elena's side. In an instant, he was lifting the chair upright and pulling a pocket knife from his boot to slice through the restraints around her wrists and ankles. "Elena," he said, her name trembling out of him as the zip ties snapped. His hands were on her then, gently cupping her face, brushing her hair back, his eyes frantically scanning for injuries. "Dio mio, are you hurt? Did they—" Elena launched herself forward, throwing her arms around Mateo's neck. All the terror, the adrenaline, the relief crashed over her and she clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder. "I'm okay," she managed between broken breaths. "I'm okay." Mateo wrapped her in his embrace, pulling her tight against him. She felt him shudder. Whether from pain or emotion, she wasn't sure. Perhaps both. "I was so afraid," she whispered. I thought I might never see you again." He pressed his lips to her hair. "I've got you," he murmured, voice thick. I'm here. It's over." They stayed like that for a long moment, on the cold concrete of the warehouse floor, holding onto each other as if the world around them had fallen away. At some point, Dominic cleared his throat gently from a respectful distance. "Boss? We should get you both out of here. Cops will be arriving soon to ask questions. Paid off or not?" Matteo nodded, but before rising, he pulled back to look at Elena. His thumb caressed her cheek where a bruise was forming. His eyes blazed with emotion, fury at those who hurt her, and profound relief and care. "Can you stand?" he asked softly. Elena realized she was still bound to the heavy chair by one partially cut strap at her ankle. I think so," she said. Her legs were shaky, but with Matteo's steady support she got to her feet. As soon as she wobbled, he scooped her into his arms without hesitation. "Matteo, I can—" She began to protest weakly. "Let me," he said, cradling her firmly against him. There was a tenderness in his command that brooked no refusal. Elena gave in, resting her head against his shoulder as he carried her out of that place of nightmares. As they exited, the night air was cool on Elena's tear-stained face. A dozen of Matteo's men formed a protective cordon, ensuring their boss and the woman he held were safe. Beyond them, at a distance, Elena saw shapes in the dark, more men, likely Bruno's reinforcements, being quietly handled or deterred by Matteo's team. It struck her how much had been at play that she hadn't even realized. Matteo eased her into the back seat of an armored car. When he went to withdraw his arms, she caught his hand, unwilling to let go. He climbed in beside her without a word, pulling her into his side. Dominic took the driver's seat, giving a brief glance back to assure himself they were both alive, a ghost of a smile of relief crossing his usually stoic face. The convoy moved out, leaving the chaos behind. Elena nestled into Matteo, exhaustion and shock starting to take their toll. But one thing nagged at her. She lifted her head to meet his gaze. You got shot," she said, voice small, as she laid a hand near the bloodstain on his sleeve. Matteo covered her hand with his. "It's nothing. Just a graze," he assured. Though up close she could see he was a bit paler than usual, the strain showing now that the adrenaline was fading. "I'll have it seen to when we get home." Home. The word warmed her. He had said it so naturally, as if home were a place they now shared. Perhaps it was just his habit, referring to his penthouse. But his eyes told a different story. He meant with you. Her throat tightened. "Matteo, thank you. You saved my life." His arm tightened around her. "You are my life," he whispered, so softly she might have thought she imagined it had she not felt the rumble of his chest under her cheek. "I would do it 1,000 times over." Fresh tears glistened in Elena's eyes, but this time they were of gratitude and something akin to joy. She tilted her face up, finding his eyes in the dim cabin of the car. "I heard what you said," she murmured. When you offered yourself for me." Her voice quavered. "You were really going to?" He brushed a tear from her lashes tenderly. "I had to keep you safe. Nothing else mattered. I would trade anything for your life. Elena, even my own. Surely you know that now." Elena managed a trembling smile. "I do now, and you must know. Matteo, I love you." The words spilled out, quiet but resolute, amidst a shaky exhale. It was the first time either of them had spoken that irrevocable word. Matteo's breath caught. In the darkness, his expression softened in a way she'd rarely seen. Open, almost vulnerable. "I love you," he confessed, his voice a rough whisper. "I think I loved you even when I was doing everything in my power to deny it. I love you, Elena, more than life, more than anything I have." A weight that had pressed on Elena's heart for months lifted in an instant. Despite the aches and the horrors of the night, She felt a profound peace hearing those words. She let out a small, relieved laugh that turned into a sob, and Matteo cradled her face and kissed her. It was not a gentle brush as before, but a true, deep kiss that tasted of salt and promises. Elena melted into it, her fingers curling into his shirt. Matteo's lips were warm and insistent, telling her without words all the fear and longing and love that had built up inside him. When they finally parted, their foreheads rested together, both breathing shakily but with smiles threatening at the corners of their mouths. "You're mine," Matteo murmured, not as an ultimatum this time, but as a reverent vow. "And I'm yours, if you'll still have me after all this." Elena answered by pressing a tender kiss to his mouth, silencing any remaining doubt. "I'm yours," she whispered against his lips. "Always." Dawn found them ensconced in Matteo's penthouse, the night's turmoil finally giving way to a calm, golden morning. They sat together on the expansive balcony overlooking the city, wrapped in a soft blanket and each other's arms. Matteo's injured arm was professionally bandaged. A doctor from the family had come and gone in the early hours, and Elena's own scrapes and bruises had been tenderly tended to by Matteo himself. Now, with steaming cups of coffee growing cold beside them, they simply soaked in the quiet of a new day, grateful to see it. Elena nestled closer against his side, drawing the blanket tighter around them. She felt safe and warm, despite the faint ache of her bruises. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly, resting her head on his shoulder. Matteo kissed her hair. "Like the luckiest man alive," he murmured. She smiled and tilted her face up to meet his. "I meant your arm," she gently scolded, though her eyes shone with happiness at his answer. He flexed it slightly. "It hurts a bit, but I'll live. It reminds me that you're safe, so I can't complain." He brushed his thumb over a small butterfly bandage on her cheek. "What about you?" "I'm okay," she assured him. "It looks worse than it feels." In truth, any pain was easily ignored in the light of what they'd gained. She covered his hand with hers. "It's over, Matteo. We're okay." He nodded slowly, as if still convincing himself that she was truly there, curled against him. His free hand found a strand of her hair, twirling it absently, the same gesture that had felt vile when Bruno did it, but from Matteo it was comforting and intimate. "Elena," he began, a rare uncertainty in his tone, "about us, about what comes next." She pressed 2 fingers to his lips, stopping him. "I already told you. I'm yours. Nothing's changed overnight except that now I know you feel the same. That's all I need." His eyes warmed. He gently took her hand from his lips and laced his fingers with hers. "Everything I have, everything I am, is yours too." He took a breath, eyes drifting to the horizon for a moment. "I don't want you in harm's way again. I think I'd die if I lost you, Elena." She felt the tremor in his voice and squeezed his hand reassuringly. "You won't lose me." He looked back at her, the morning light softening the hard planes of his face. "I know my world is dangerous, but I swear to you, I'll do everything to shield you from it. And I don't mean by shutting you out. Never again. I want you by my side, but protected." Elena leaned up and captured his lips in a soft kiss. "We'll protect each other," she whispered. "I may not have your strength or resources, but I have my own kind of strength. And you make me braver, Matteo." A content silence fell as he held her. Below them, the city stirred awake, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in its shadows. After a while, Matteo gave a low hum, a hint of playfulness returning to his voice. "That reminds me," he said, brushing his knuckles lightly along the side of her neck, just above her collarbone. "It seems the mark that started all this has almost faded." Elena felt heat rush to her cheeks and she laughed softly, covering her face with her hand. "Oh God, that... I'd be happy to never hear the word hickey again. Matteo chuckled, a deep, pleasing sound she realized she hadn't heard nearly enough. I don't know, he purred, gently tugging her hand away from her face. I was thinking maybe I should give you one myself, just so there's never any confusion about who you belong to. His tone was teasing, but his eyes smoldered with a possessive light that sent a warm shiver through her. Elena arched an eyebrow, pretending to consider. A matching set, huh? One on the other side? He grinned, clearly pleased she was playing along. Maybe somewhere less visible. I do have a reputation to maintain at the office, he said in mock seriousness, eyes dancing. Can't have everyone seeing and gossiping, unless you want them to. She swatted his chest lightly, giggling. You're impossible. Matteo caught her hand and brought it to his lips, the mirth in his face giving way to a more earnest expression. But in all honesty, I meant it, Elena. I want the world to know you're mine. Not because I want to possess you, but because I want to cherish you, openly. If you'll stand by me, that is. Elena felt her heart swell. She thought of the timid glances, the restrained smiles they had exchanged for months when everything was unspoken. How different it would be now, to stand at Matteo's side without fear or pretense. I'll stand by you, she vowed. Though I think half the office already suspects something after yesterday's theatrics, she added wryly. Matteo groaned softly, remembering. I did make a scene, didn't I? He looked almost sheepish. They'll have to get used to it. I'm done hiding how I feel about you. Elena couldn't stop smiling. She wrapped her arms around his waist, laying her head against his chest, right over his steady heartbeat. So am I. They stayed that way, entwined, as the sun fully crested the skyline. There would be much to do in the coming days. Questions to answer, business to attend, a new normal to establish. But they would face it together. For now, in the quiet golden light of morning, Matteo De Luca and Elena Donovan found peace in each other. After all the jealousy, fear, and storm, they had come out the other side bound by something far stronger. He was her protector and partner. She was his anchor and light. And as Matteo tilted her chin up and pressed a tender kiss to her lips, Elena knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had found where she belonged, safe in the arms of the man who would forever hold her heart, just as surely as she held his. They were each other's, now and always.